Bring up to date again right quick. As we're taping these, we're doing them 1 hour at a time, but we understand that in some locales, that's places, that they're only showing on the cable half of the program, half of what we're taping. And so what we're doing is, normally the first half of each evening is taken up by people reading what's known as the Kyroots papers. It's a group of stories, one-liners, epigrams, dictums, epitaphs, aphorisms, stuff. And then, as the page being read is flashed on a gigantic scoreboard over here in the corner, and then people who find that they would like to hear any additional comment, they write down on the number of the page. Then it goes on this sheet. Well, of course, first it's sent to Oklahoma City, and then they fax it back here, and then we stop the tape for just a second, and then I have been chosen. Kyroots still will not come on camera, and so they have picked me, and then I come on and I look at this and I read the Kyroot and see if there's, he sort of prompts me, or at least agrees to go ahead and give it a shot. So that's what we're doing. Here we go. Some of them, as you're going to find out, of course, there's a Kyroot last time, that all good magicians, ventriloquists, priests, psychiatrists, and executioners know. So no showbiz axiom is where you do things is you tell the crowd what you're going to do, you do it, and then you tell them that you did it, and you take a bow. So you're going to find out that some of these I may go ahead and read, and I may not say anything. God knows why. You figure out. I don't know what to say. I can't figure what to say. What I intend to hint is some of them, I just don't think anything additional should be said. But if somebody had the interest to write it down, I feel almost duty-bound to perhaps read it. So I went through all that because this first one I don't think I'm going to say anything about, but I'm going to read it. It was the first one I requested. And Kyroots said, there is a rhythm to sight as though light plays a drum on the eyes. Now, rather than just casually lumping that into bad metaphysical poetry, might I suggest that this might have something to do, I'm just going to suggest, with how man normally orients himself vis-a-vis the senses in this life, not just primarily, which man is a visual animal. We all know that from high school. What do you call it? Bathroom? No, biology, physiology. But there's a rhythm to sight as the light plays a drum on the eyes. Back to what I was just about to say when I told you I wasn't going to say anything. That this would obviously have some pertinence, metaphorically at least, to the primary world of man's physical world on the basis that he is, as opposed to certain other creatures, primarily driven by sight, primarily runs his sails and rudders through this great ocean of life, physically, through sight. Then might I suggest this might have something to do then with man's secondary, intellectual, psychological, to you crude people, world, wherein something else is afoot, that there is some kind of information that almost sets a rhythm. Now, don't anyone think that that might have anything to do with one's own individual personality? Like hell. I mean, you would not. You don't want me to say this, and I'm not going to say it. Well, I didn't say this. I'm just going to repeat it. I heard somebody say this. That a man's individual personality, if you knew the kind of digital running of certain energies on this planet, you could take a man's individual personality and program it into a drum machine, into a rhythm machine. And if you knew what you were doing, you could have everyone's played back, and you go, oh, that's Fred. Oh, that's my Aunt Clara. Now, wait a minute, that sounds suspiciously like, could it be Dr. Johnson? Oh, maybe Boswell. That's what somebody said. I found it as unbelievable as you did. And Kyroots said, only those acceptant of death think about it. Many times may I also suggest that Kyroots and the people these characters about whom he relays stories, speak of death, but may I suggest you, knowing him, if I may be so bold, don't mean to drop names, but knowing him as I do, may I suggest to you that it has almost this much to do with actual death. Maybe overstating it, but at least this much, to actual death. But do note how much of man's history, psychology, philosophy, religion, poetry has to do with what? The big D. And Kyroots said, I won't repeat it to get going, only those acceptant of death, think about it. Who would that include? Well, in the ordinary world, let's see. All right, let's put it another way so I got that gesture down already. Let's reverse it. Who in the ordinary world would that exclude? See, I'd already practiced, is why I changed the sentence around, because I had this one down. People think about death. Not just ordinary people going around thinking about death, which is enough, but you have people into the great, wondrous schools of metaphysical philosophy, poetry, who write about death, sing its praises, talk about how they would welcome it, threaten to cause their own, until they find out that their readers or their audience wanders off, and then many people withdraw their threat, or they put it in abeyance, many times for another 50 or 60 years, and then they think, well, I was going to commit suicide, and I'll be damned if I'm not about to be hit by that truck. Only those acceptant of death think about it. Now, let's try to get into the epilogue part, which sometimes is sort of the punchline. And then Kyroots added, since it's your birthday, I won't note how this might apply to pseudo-intelligence. I know this may be one of the ones, because I was sitting out there hearing it for the first time with you people, and some of these, I look at it once I get here, and it's nothing weird. I don't mean it's anything unusual, but you should all know some things, you hear them a certain way, and they are different if you look at it. So this didn't even strike me all that succinctly, whatever that means. But now that I see it, consider it this way. Let's take this punchline and let me rephrase it as per the opening line, which was, would you repeat it? All right. Only those acceptant of death think about it. And then if we took this punchline, it would be only those acceptant of pseudo-intelligence think about it. I knew that would help a lot. That's metaphysical poetry talk for those of you people in Minnesota for help. In other words, of course, what it's really saying then, if I'm correct, where do you go? Well, if I'm correct, what it's really saying is that the ordinary mind, whatever you think about, should I go this far? It's kind of a waste of time. Can we do it again? Only those acceptant of death. You understand that with the sentence? Only those who will accept the fact of death think about it. Of course, we could wander off into all kinds if we were ordinary people. Fat chance. If we were ordinary people, then you could say, well, thinking about death shows that it does exist. But then if you wanted to get a bit more metaphysical, then you could say, well, then you're insinuating that accepting the fact that you die is tied to thinking about it. And that therefore there's some sort of insinuation that if you didn't think about it, or if you refused it, of course, then it's just one small step to either falling into being religious or going somewhere and wanting, saying, do you have any books by Alexander Pope? It's that kind of stuff. So you could go off the deep end. Other than the fact that he was under 5 feet tall, so if you fall off of him, I guess you're in fairly decent shape. So, the inference being that in some way that there might be some way not to accept death. I'm not saying this literally. This is certainly nothing to do with theology and life after death. But if death were not accepted, and for death to be an accepted fact, you've got to be intellectual. You've got to be living in the secondary world, because if you were a human and you did not have a functioning intellect, then there is no such thing as death. I mean, you're going to die, but there's no such thing as death because you don't know it. So you have got to be intellectual. You have got to have it functioning. You have got to have your nervous system alive at this end. You've got to be fully civilized, literate, verbal, and etc., or at least verbal. So the inference then being that there might be some way that death doesn't exist like everybody thinks. Again, strike any kind of idea that I'm trying to insinuate some kind of metaphysical, occult, hocus pocus. But then take that, if that were, and of course that is a common strain throughout history of people thinking, well, there is some way to get around death. I mean, street corners are full places that teach that. What do you call them? Waffle shops? No, synagogues, churches, and all that stuff. But, see, Kyroots went ahead and pointed out, what if there was something to do with what he calls pseudo-intelligence? What if it only exists if you think about it? But then the thing is, an ordinary person, if they followed into this, are you kidding? If they followed into this, then would say, well, wait a minute. If it's pseudo-intelligence, how am I thinking about it in the first place? Which would get, if an ordinary person could do that, then you'd want to go, maybe go, aha. And of course, they're ordinary, they'd suddenly come to their senses and go, aha, hell. But if pseudo-intelligence, whatever that would be, how about less than full-blown intelligence? How about if you're just running on, like 5 cylinders? And that was just pseudo-intelligence, you could do better. What if, what this is inferring, if pseudo-intelligence exists only by those who accept it? That is, that, well, I'm stupid only because I accept being stupid. And don't take stupid as a measurement. I am what I am intellectually only on the basis that I accept it. And then if I played this little game with, aha, then it'd bring people back to their senses. Because they'd be on the verge maybe of seeing something, but then they'd go, hell. Because what are you going to do other than what you think? Wait a minute, you mean I would not be thinking what I do if I didn't think I did? No, I didn't say that. Jesus. See, I knew if I stayed there long enough that you'd exaggerate it. And Kyroots said, I find this appropriate, especially here we're on TV, so I can't pick on anybody else. We are too. But anyway, here it is. People nowadays will reveal almost anything about themselves. Except for one little item. They won't do it, even on the highest rated talk shows, even with the tacit promise off stage, off camera, that they might let you stay over in New York or Chicago an extra night at their expense. People reveal almost anything. You know that. They'll come and they'll reveal anything. Except for one little detail. Yes, sirree. And don't bother me if you don't understand. Write Oprah or somebody and ask them what it is. And Kyroots said, one old rebel said to his kid, life really ain't worth thinking about unless you think about it in this one special way. And of course, added Kyroots, this is exactly why everybody else does it that way anyway. I like those that are just dirt clear, so I don't have to fool with. Makes you proud to have been born in the Midwest. And Kyroots noted, some with talent leave town. All want to. And a man asked, is that the purpose of talent? Is that the purpose of having talent, is to make you want to leave town? Those that have studied, if you were an ordinary person and could be unordinary for a second, I started to say those who have studied the lives of artists. Those who might have dreamed they had a modicum of talent. People have long pondered, what is it having some talent? Especially in the arts, that's what it normally, let's just stay with that for a second. What is it to be an artist, a painter? What is it to hear full-blown symphonies flow through your head? What is it to have this itch to want to be creative? Because normally, to do that in the ordinary sense, then you're behavioral-wise, external-wise, you're normally out of step. No matter what time, no matter what place, whether it was Baghdad 6,000 years ago, or whether it's, as many of you know, whether it was Soho last week. No matter how out of step Soho or the left bank or the village used to be compared to people over in Yonkers, then inside the rebel enclaves, the artistes, what were artists last week in Soho or the village, the real artists this week are out of step with the ones last week, or you're not an artist. I mean, if last week, speaking metaphorically, all decided, let's cut off our ear, then this week's artist would look around and think, talk about old hat. And I mean, he'd have to cut off a foot or his nose or something, or grow a third ear, paste one on. So what this is, I was trying to get to obliquely, is everyone who has any talent. You don't have to be that weird, and you don't have to go live with a ferret. What do you call those places up in Paris? You don't have to go live in a ferret. Well, I'll look it up later. That's close. Live in a ferret. And don't write me badgering me about that. But anyone who has the least bit of talent is going to be out of step. Whether you actually physically look that way, whether you're wearing a beret, if it was in the 1920s, and acting weird and a long cigarette hole, you feel out of step. That's why you got, at any rate you do. Kyroots starts out pointing, some with talent leave town, all with talent want to. It's not even symbolic, this is metaphorical because people try it, which is part of being a rebel at the visual, at the overt level of whatever the latest hairdo is, or if you got to make up your own. Whatever would piss off ordinary people. What even would offend, if you're really good, even the artist of your time and place. If you can do that, you're even a step ahead of them. That's leaving town. Some with talent actually do it. It doesn't get them anywhere, not from a more complex view. What that is, overtly, physically rebelling, fashion-wise, painting something that makes people throw up. That is leaving town. But now you got to watch this if you're trying to watch it at all, because it changes. It's not horses, gallery owners, and midstream several times. Because some with talent leave town, all with talent want to. And a man asks, is that the purpose of talent? All right, I've gone that far, I'm going to answer the man. Yes. It is. But then you're left, since we're running out of time, you got to figure, in the ordinary world, what good does it do? No, it's a hobby. In some other place, what good does it do? All right, I'll do this again. Don't do it back to me, I know you would. Point taken, I know. Of course, there was a Kyroot a few nights back. I'll conclude that portion by pointing out there was a Kyroot that went something like this. Have a B flat, do. Only a revolutionist can take a vacation without leaving home. We got a couple here that are connected, so I'm going to do them. Are you ready? Somebody only asked for one, but here it goes. And Kyroots said, uncivilized, guilt-producing behavior is the intellect sweating. And Kyroot added, there are only two reasonable creatures dislike a treadmill. The feet and the head. You wrestle with your own understanding of saying, wait a minute, my feet aren't reasonable. See, now that's just the kind of person who thinks that they've got a reasonable head. That's the kind of person who will accept pseudo-thinking, pseudo-intelligence. And if anybody, of course, out there was actually listening by now, they should be getting offended, which was not my intention, but you should be. But don't be offended at me, it's you thinking it. How? Why in the world would somebody, is that some kind of literary device to say only two reasonable creatures are offended, dislike a treadmill? You could get ready for it. But then to say, head's all right, the second one, but to say feet and the head, then those operating at the ordinary level of head would be offended if they took this seriously. They would be insulted. Which I refer you back to one that Kyroot's been pulling or mentioning for the last few nights. That's like nowadays, people reveal almost everything. People admit. People will absorb just all sorts of secondary body blows, such as walk in a bar and holler, I'm going to whip every homosexual, atheist, Baptist, Jew, people uncircumcised, people wearing women's underwear. You can just go on all kinds of insults, and nowadays it'd be like a world's largest bar, coon talk show, if people stand there and they go, the things that could have offended people a generation ago, and you go on and on. People who drive General Motors cars, people who pay all their taxes, people who never pay taxes. You go on and on, but you get to one spot. And nowadays you're asking for trouble. People reveal almost anything about themselves. Variation. People will take almost any accusation, which is a form of revealing. It'd be like you being on a talk show and somebody saying, well, you've admitted as a child you were abused, misused, tossed up in the air like a volleyball, and that both of your parents hated you and they got drunk and you made them all die just from hating you. Yeah. But on top of that, you know what I think about you, sir or madam? And there you're on the show and the camera on you and the red light. And you go, what? I don't think that you have ever read even one Shakespeare play all of the way through. Are you serious? Are you saying that to me? They will see, that's a form. If you'll react to it, that's a form of revealing. Back to an early one, that people nowadays will reveal almost anything about themselves except for one teensy little item. Reacting to an accusation is a form of revealing oneself, may I suggest, especially when you do that. So, what I was trying to get you to see was what? Where I left you hanging. So if you will do that, then there's only two reasonable creatures just like the treadmill. The head, the feet, and the head. Where somebody would take that as being beyond the pale, the acceptable pale of revelation about themselves, of accusation, is to say, what you're saying is you've got two reasonable parts to you. Your feet and your head. And that would be like walking into this fictitious bar and accuse everyone there of every despicable, ungodly, immoral thing possible except for one little one, which people, by and large, find intolerable. The what? Wait a minute, would you repeat that? What'd you say? This is very close to the same thing. Well, yes, my head. In fact, if you mean being on a treadmill metaphorically, certainly my head does. I hate useless repetition or thinking about the same thing over and over, refighting yesterday's battles. Certainly. But how dare you put my feet, or if they were trying to weasel out and act a bit more sophisticated, how dare you put man's feet, throw them out on third parties, on the same level as his head? Sir, I take umbrage at that, whatever that means. And as well they should. And you too. Of course, Kyroots didn't say it, but I was going to point out that tied umbrage is happy umbrage. "5 minutes. And Kyroots said, those impressed by, quotation marks, group responses, which is all sorts of things, collective wisdom, collective thought, the attitudes, the positions of institutions. What amounts to is collective thought/behavior. Behavior is almost of no consequence, but I throw that in case you need a jump start. Those impressed by group responses might be the sorts that would cheer on a volcano. Addendum, surprise, to a planet, the individual creatures mean nothing, but to one growing, everything." 4 minutes there. There's nothing wrong with group responses. That is being civilized. Contraire, once you have some of your own view about, let us say, how life may actually be working, you would be, again, one of the first ones to cheer on group responses. And I don't mean some kind of mad mob behavior, as history calls it. Always notice that's after the fact. You're in someone else's kingdom, because when you're there in the kingdom, the mad mob, the insane, fanatical behavior No one, it never crossed anyone's mind. It's got to be after the fact, or it's got to be over in somebody else's stadium. It's got to be in a kingdom next door. There is nothing wrong with, as Kyroots calling it, group responses. You should cheer it on. Hooray for life. Hooray for civilization. I mean, if your vote counted for anything, if suddenly, a parade's going by and it's civilization, and people hollering, yes, we are all, fill it in, we are all uncircumcised Rotarians, members of the Moose Lodge. And if that's the group response, and they're not hurting anybody, they're not burning things down, or they're not trying to, shoot you, or they're not coming by and trying to step on your foot as they go by, if a large number of them, who, let us say, especially perhaps they're armed, look your way, look right at them and go, hey, hey, right on, you mighty Moose Lodgers, or whoever they are. It is not that there's anything wrong with the group responses, but from a more complex view, the group responses, what it amounts to, is if you're impressed by that, then of course you're impressed by pseudo-intelligence. You're impressed by the thought processes of man less than what they could be. Because if it were not less than they could be, then those involved with group thinking wouldn't be involved with group thinking. They'd be somewhere else. They wouldn't be out there in the parade. So whatever the group is thinking, it's not that it's wrong. But if you are attempting to do something on your own, then what they're doing is a waste of time. They're the same ones that would cheer on and holler, hooray for a hurricane, come on. Because you can say, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. Well, certainly it is. Because what's it going to do? It may not hit them. But why in the hell call for it and say, yeah, over this way, go for it. Because it's going to turn on you sooner or later. That is, it will prove ultimately unprofitable to an individual. It's not your problem. Life's taking care of itself. Life will do all right. The mob will not get out of hand. I really don't think, I'm going to tell you the truth, I do not think, no matter what kind of mob action and mass insanity takes place, I do not think that humans are going to be able, at least in our lifetime, to burn up or destroy the planet. That's just my best guess. Tell you for what it's worth. So, life is looking after itself. The mob is not going to get out of hand. I know people say it is, but you got 6,000 years of Western history to, in case you really wanted to mess up your mind, at no great charge and without having to watch TV, is to go find where life got out of hand. I mean, where man got out of hand and life went, woo! Boy, that was a close call. Now, it's the other way around. It's men going, whoo, boy, is that a close call. Except when the close call's gone. And it's like when, when death, you find out going past your door, then everybody suddenly goes, hey, fuck death. Once you realize that death or the typhoon's down the street and and out of sight, then everybody goes, hey, it doesn't bother me. Folks, we're out of time. Bye. Do it next time.